Welcome back, everyone. This is part 4, the final part for today for Monday, July 29th, 2013. This is GGN and I'm Darko. My channels are DDarko2012 and DDarko2013. If you'd like to subscribe, I recommend subscribing to the 2013 account because, like I said, I'm not sure if I'll keep posting to the 2012 account. Goldman's blank find says the worst case scenario absolutely will happen. So this is no big surprise because we know that this economy is made for large corporations to siphon generations worth of wealth from hardworking people, and that's what they do. So, talking about the worst case scenario absolutely will happen, he's talking about the best case scenario for them, which is to make a lot of money. So that'd be the worst case scenario for you, which you're going to lose a lot of money. So people need to be aware of this, though. They shouldn't trust banks at all. So it goes both ways. You can't just put all the blame on them. It goes on people who trust banks, who go and take on these 30-year mortgages and these huge car loans. So, they're just to blame as well. 80% of U.S. adults are near poverty and rely on welfare or are underemployed. Despite consumer confidence at a 6-year high, the latest AP survey of the real America shows a stunning 4 out of 5 U.S. adults struggle with joblessness, are near poverty, or rely on welfare for at least parts of their lives amid signs of deteriorating economic security, an elusive American dream. Pessimism among whites about their families' economic futures has climbed to the highest point since at least 1987. So it says here, hardship is particularly on the rise among whites based on several measures. Poverty is no longer an issue of them. It is an issue of us. The invisible poor, or lower income whites, are generally dispersed in suburbs, Appalachia, the industrial Midwest, and across America's heartland, says where more than 60% of the poor are white. More than 19 million whites fall below the poverty line of $23,000 for a family of 4, accounting for more than 41% of the nation's destitute, nearly double the number of poor blacks, and as one survey respondent noted, I think it's going to get worse. So one person said if you do try to go apply for a job, they're not hiring people and they're not paying that much to even go to work. She said, children have nothing better to do than to get on drugs. Economic insecurity among whites also is more pervasive than is shown in government data, engulfing more than 76% of white adults by the time they turn 60, according to new data. Obama's economy, 2 food stamp recipients for every job created. For every job the White House claims to have created, 7.2 million now. 2 more Americans were added to the nation's food stamp program, federal statistics reveal. More than 32 million Americans receive help from the food stamp program. Then we have an exclusive signs of declining economic security. It says here, 4 out of 5 U.S. adults struggle with joblessness, near poverty, or reliance on welfare for at least parts of their lives, a sign of deteriorating economic security, and basically what we just covered. So, all right, next up, Bank of Cyprus depositors lose 47% of savings over 1,000 euros. Depositors at bailed out Cyprus's largest bank will lose 47% of their savings, exceeding 100,000 euros, or about $132,000, the government said on Monday. It was part of an agreement where they have these so-called bail-ins to prop up the country's teetering banking sector. Billionaire Stephen Cohen throws a party despite indictment. Hedge fund billionaire Stephen Cohen did not let the filing of criminal charges against his $14 billion capital advisors get in the way of a party this weekend at his vacation estate in East Hampton, New York. So Saturday night at Cohen's 10-bedroom home in Further Lane took place 2 days after federal prosecutors in New York announced a 5-count criminal indictment against SAC Capital. So it portrayed the 21-year-old Stamford, Connecticut-based fund as a breeding ground for unlawful insider trading. So even though I'm not a millionaire myself, I tend to kind of stick up for millionaires because you have these billionaires and trillionaires that are really running the show, and they have tax havens, and yet a lot of times millionaires who are responsible for much of the jobs that are created. They always say, most of the jobs that are created are local businesses. Well, who are those people? They're millionaires, right? And they have to fork over about $300,000 in taxes, if not more, with inflation and other permits and stuff like that. So it sounds nice to be called a millionaire, but I wouldn't consider myself rich if I was. 72% of millionaires don't think they're rich, so to those with millions to invest, wealth means financial freedom. Half of investors define wealth instead of as basically having no financial constraints on what they do, but the reason they don't feel wealthy is because they don't feel like they have a comprehensive financial plan. So unemployment, the economy, and caring for relatives are all cause for concern, meaning millionaires face many of the same pressures as everyone else. It says here that plus there's the feeling that the more you have to lose. Apparently, once you pass the $5 million mark, however, the pressure eases up. Of that number, 60% said they were indeed well off. So 58% said it was ridiculous. But I have a relative that he was like a bond trader, and I believe he was a millionaire at the time. I'm not sure if he still is, but he's a truck driver now. And my aunt, who never worked most of her life, was a stay-at-home mom, is now a nanny. So go figure. Mysterious hum driving people crazy around the world, so it creeps in slowly in the dark of the night, and once inside it almost never goes away. So it's known as a hum, a steady droning sound that's heard in places as desperate as Taos, New Mexico, Bristol, England, large Scotland. It says, but what causes the hum and why it only affects a small percentage of the population in certain areas remains a mystery despite a number of scientific investigations started in the 50s. So and it says here that generally it's heard indoors and is louder at night than during the day, more common in rural or suburban environments. So it was weird because this article came around right on the same time that someone was mentioning that they were hearing a hum while over the phone. They kept saying, what is that? What is that? I don't know. And I was getting kind of weird little headaches. I thought they were like kind of pressure pulsing HARP type headaches. So, but I don't know what they're doing. But I do know that today they're spraying really bad. I've been sneezing today, and I'm like, well, I'm either sick or I have August allergies. And then I looked out just now, and I could see that they are just hosing us. There was probably about 4 planes right over our area spraying, and they were doing the vertical spraying too, where they don't just spray going across horizontally. They're actually like flying up and down. So, and they basically busted a bunch of clouds. So, but you've probably seen the videos. They were about 2 years ago. When you had the swirls coming out of CERN, basically CERN in Norway, where they had the swirls and stuff, and they say, "Oh, it's a UFO," it's blah blah blah. I mean, this is real technology that they're doing. Joint Intelligence, Pine Gap, Australia's most secretive location. So we're talking about the suspicious sounds that were being heard, and they kind of haven't heard them in a while. So every once in a while they crank it up. Last week it was revealed that the Australian research facility Pine Gap might be indirectly responsible for U.S. drone strikes which have killed Pakistani citizens. It's a secret facility west of Alice Springs. It's been there since 1970, run by both Australia and the United States. Official name is Joint Defense Facility Pine Gap, even though our government really hates to admit it exists. Here's a little sign, no thorough road, Joint Defense Facility, Pine Gap, prohibited area, turn around now. Yeah, it's in the middle of nowhere. They say it's essentially a satellite tracking station situated in the middle of nowhere because it makes it hard for other countries to intercept signals emitted from within. It's thought that the U.S. controls all of the spy satellites from Pine Gap and that the U.S. and Australia listen to Asia from the 14 antenna concealed beneath the white domes at Pine Gap. But a Pakistani lawyer went on the record this week saying Pine Gap tracks the communications of al-Qaeda and Taliban militants. It says this, he says, enables the U.S. to target those militants within the drone strikes. So sadly, these strikes kill civilians in addition to killing military targets. And you can go in there and you can type in all kinds of stuff about Pine Gap. But one of them is that one of the conspiracy theories is that it kind of runs like HARP or CERN, and it operates some kind of Project Bluebeam that projects holographic images into the sky. I would imagine sounds, audio as well. And I heard a little blurb about this, about HARP shutting down because they couldn't pay their power bills or something. Just some real crap. But HARP Ionospheric Research Program set to continue. Reports that HARP has been shut down permanently were apparently a bit premature. So the facility is only temporarily off the air while operating contractors are changed. Operating contractors are changed. I love this stuff, right? Despite being associated with various natural disasters over the past 2 decades by the conspiracy fringe, HARP is in reality a facility for studying the ionosphere. So they're going to tell you what the reality is, right? They're going to define reality for you. and Conspiracy Fringe. It's funny because right before I basically almost got my website shut down and my YouTube channel almost shut down for talking about what I was talking about, one of the articles that I mentioned was about how the conspiracy theories are quote conspiracy theorists. I don't even like to call myself that, but people who are labeled conspiracy theorists are actually more rational than those that bash conspiracy theorists. It's kind of funny, isn't it? And that those that bash conspiracy theorists actually have conspiracy theories of their own. It is kind of interesting, though. They don't actually say why it was shut down right here. They just go on and on and on about what it actually does. But, you know, right before I left, too, I was talking about how they're trying to create a drought. And then all of a sudden it cooled. It just cooled. The last 3 days it just cooled. And then if this thing was down, it makes you wonder, did they actually overload? I mean, this thing takes a lot of power. Did they actually overload the system in trying to create this drought? Because it was freaking hot, man. And we've had a relatively cool year this year, and then all of a sudden, the first 3 weeks in July, we were just frying. And this last, almost this last week, has been the last 4 days have been cooler. So it makes me wonder if they just had an overload, right? They overloaded the system, and that's why it got cooler. Now they're out there spraying again. People are hearing humming sounds. Weather eye, temperatures are cooling, but still no rain. So one of the things that I noticed that this past week is that they haven't been spraying. Today's the first day I've seen them where they're really hosing us. Spacecraft sees giant hole in the sun. A space telescope aimed at the sun has spotted a gigantic hole in the solar atmosphere, a dark spot that covers nearly a quarter of our closest star, spewing solar material and gas into space. The so-called coronal hole over the sun's north pole came into view between July 13th and July 18th. These holes are not uncommon. The sun is currently reaching its 11-year peak in activity, known as the solar maximum. Around the time of this peak, the sun's poles switch their magnetism. And it says a number of coronal holes typically decrease leading up to the switch. Scientists say full moon may disturb good night's sleep. They conducted research by the Swiss scientists has uncovered that moonlight can affect good sleep patterns on nights around the moon. When the moon was round, volunteers took longer to nod off and had poorer quality sleep. Despite being shut in a darkened room, they had a slight decrease in levels of the hormone known as melatonin. Spain privatizing the sun issues heavy penalties for collecting sunlight. If you get caught collecting photons of sunlight for your own use, you can drop a fine not exceeding $30 million. Then you have, remember this from back in 2012, Oregon man sentenced to jail for collecting rainwater on his own property. Because what? It says here he didn't obtain a permit from the state. Fukushima operator announces plan to release radioactive water into Pacific from July 28th from oilprice.com. Kind of funny though, they're announcing a plan to release radioactive water in the Pacific when we've already covered this, that Japan's Fukushima operator confirms nuclear reactors are leaking into the ocean. So they've already been doing it. So, followed by this, Halliburton pleads guilty to destroying Gulf oil spill evidence. They agreed to plead guilty to destroying evidence related to his complicity in causing the 2010 Deepwater Horizon disaster, which killed 11 workers and spilled nearly 5 billion barrels of oil into the Gulf. Here you go. This is justice for you, right? It says here that they charged with one misdemeanor, $200,000 fine. Oh, and they'll be put on 3 years probation. Remember this? Why did Halliburton buy an oil cleanup company 8 days before the oil spill? The company called Boots & Coots has agreed to sell out to Halliburton for $240 million prior to the spill. Outrageous, they say. BP ad claims American businesses real victims of Gulf disaster. So it destroyed the ecosystem and the communities that it supports. But it says here now BP is playing the victim. So they put an ad in the New York Times and Wall Street Journal on Thursday, paid for by BP, and painting American businesses as the victim in the aftermath of the oil disaster. Among those most angered by the BP-sponsored ad, the actual victims of the region's worst ever environmental disaster. Remember, they're talking about creating alternative fuel, biofuels, like in the Great Lakes. So this is another reason for doing it purposefully. Basically, algae. Spills at Alberta oil sands operation. Oil spills at major oil sands operation in Canada have been ongoing for at least 6 weeks. They've been unable to stop an underground oil blowout that has killed numerous animals and contaminated a lake, forest, and basically a muskeg at its operation. Scientists said Canadian Natural Resources is not disclosing the scope of the spills in 4 separate sites, which have been off bounds to media and the public. And I'm going to stop here. I'm going to do 5 videos because I still have more news to do. So join me in part 5. This is GGN and I'm Darko. Thank you.